Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, On Screen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to On Screen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are finally going to finish out The Last of Us Season 1. Before that, we got some stuff to look forward to on the horizon, and that is where we are going to start with our On the Horizon segment.
On the horizon.
On the Horizon, as always, is where we talk about stuff that's coming up in the next week or so. And we got a few interesting things coming up to talk about here. First off, on Sunday, March 19th on AMC, Lucky Hank starts. Now you might be asking yourself, what is Lucky Hank? I've never heard of this. This is the new AMC series starring Bob Odenkirk as a college professor having a midlife crisis. Here's the two key things you need to know about that. AMC, Bob Odenkirk.
Yes, that's all you need to know.
Exactly. This is coming off of Better Call Saul, this is what we need. Next up, on Wednesday, March 22nd, a new animated series called Digman is coming to Comedy Central. This is kind of a spoof of Indiana Jones movies, but it's with Andy Samberg voicing the lead role, and it's like a comedy animated series of a kind of Indiana Jones type character.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Kind of like Archer was for Bond, I guess. This is for Indiana Jones. Next up, on Thursday, March 23rd, The Night Agent comes to Netflix. This is a political thriller about a low-level FBI agent who gets involved in some case that involves, the President of the United States and all sorts of high-level conspiracies and stuff going on in the government. But he's this low-level guy that's only supposed to be watching this phone that is not supposed to ever even ring. There's no expectation to ring, and his job is just to stand guard over this phone and wait for it to ring, which they don't expect to happen, but it does. And then all this stuff ends up happening. That's Thursday, March 23rd on Netflix. Next up, on Friday, March 24th on Hulu, Up Here debuts. This is a musical romantic comedy. Then also on Friday, March 24th, Resident Evil 4 Remake hits PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. I don't think that's all, right? It's not coming to PC yet or the other systems?
It's PS4, PlayStation 5, Windows, Xbox Series X and S.
Oh, so it's everything but Switch.
With support for PSVR 2.
Okay. Everything but Switch, basically, then.
And it's not coming out on Xbox One either.
Okay. So it's coming out for Series, but not One. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's on PlayStation 4 and 5.
And then lastly, also on Friday, March 24th, John Wick Chapter 4 hits theaters.
I saw IGN gave that a 10.
Yeah, they said it was
review.
The best John Wick movie. Which, I don't know, it's going to be hard for me to think that that's true. I imagine the action's going to be better, but for me, I still think the first of the three I've seen, the three that are out, I still think the first John Wick movie is the best. By the way, and this is just a little bit of a side, and I don't even remember the name of the movie, but do you know that the team that made John Wick is making this movie that takes place around World War II? I think it's called Sisu or something, and you need to check out the trailer for that. It has some of the coolest kills I've ever seen in a trailer. It's
Nice.
John Wick, but an old northern man, like Norwegian or something like that. He's Norwegian or Dutch or something like that, fighting Nazis.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, that's a cool one. But that is the end for our On the Horizon segment, and that leaves our final segment, full spoilers. This week on Full Spoilers, we are going to close out our discussion of The Last of Us Season 1. We are going to be talking about the last two episodes of The Last of Us Season 1. Season 1, Episode 8, When We Are in Need, and Season 1, Episode 9, Look for the Light. Now, unlike a lot of the ones we've done before, these kind of are two distinct episodes. So let's talk about the first one here. Season 1, Episode 9, When We Are in Need. When we last left off, Joel was in need.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
He was stabbed and wounded and suffering from infection, and Ellie was trying to save his life, and she was trying to stitch him up. That's the last we saw of him. And then we had that episode that kind of focused on Ellie's past, and now we're getting back to Joel and seeing what's going on with him. And Ellie as well. Ellie ends up heading out to go hunting, and in doing so, she encounters a group of people, a religious flock, and ends up getting tangled up with them, and ends up finding out that these people are connected to the group of raiders that they fought off at the college earlier in 2 episodes back that ended up leading to Joel becoming injured.
Yes.
So this is like a typical trope you see in multiple ways of like post-apocalyptic shows of like a religious community in the post-apocalypse. But this is tied to another trope, which is like a big kind of reveal in the episode that this is a group of religious zealots in the post-apocalypse who are also cannibals.
Yeah. So yeah, we find out there's a reveal that the person who stabbed Joel with the baseball bat and who Joel killed was a member of this group, and they were actively looking for Joel and Ellie for retribution. Mm-hmm. But the leader of the group takes an interest in Ellie and wants to take her back to his commune alive, but they can kill Joel.
There's a creepy air to it a little bit, but it's kind of explained away initially as like him seeing something in Ellie that he sees in himself. And he even vocalizes this at one point saying like, you have a violent heart. I know because I also have a violent heart.
Yeah.
But soon after that point of dialogue in the episode, which we'd kind of been led to thinking maybe that's the case, we get kind of like a more honest explanation of why David is interested in Ellie.
He's a pedophile.
It's super creepy. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a pedophile and he's attracted to her. And so all those creepy vibes that we'd been kind of feeling through the episode, but pushing aside thinking like, oh, it's not that. He's interested in her because she's like him, or he sees something of him in her. And then it's like, nope. We were right to feel creeped out by him initially.
Yeah, we were right. He also reveals that he's not really religious. He just uses religion to control these people and to quote unquote lead them.
Yeah.
So he just uses it as a tool to put himself in a position of power over this group.
We see this, we end up getting kind of the idea of what's going on with this. There's only kind of really 2 significant characters besides Joel and Ellie in this episode. And that is David, who we talked about, and his second in command, James, who's played by Troy Baker.
Yeah.
Tell us who Troy Baker is.
Joel from The Last of Us. Yeah.
From the game. Yeah, the game version of The Last of Us. So in a sense, to jump ahead a little bit before we head back, we got to see Ellie kill Joel.
Yeah.
Which was kind of funny.
Yeah, Ellie kills that guy in a gambit after she bites the leader's hand. What was his name? David. Yeah, after she breaks David's finger, actually. She breaks his finger. Mm-hmm. And then they throw her onto the table. And I think he said they're gonna like chop off.
He said he was going to cut her up into pieces because she said some line about, you cutting people to pieces. And he says like, what was it you said? Cutting to pieces or something?
Yeah.
Referring to her because she had spurred his advances.
Yeah. And then she reveals like, she says she's been infected and that causes panic mostly in David's number 2 there, played by Troy Baker. And during that confusion, she uses that to grab the butcher's knife to kill James.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because that was a kind of clever setup because she did bite him. You said she didn't bite him, she bit his finger. That was at that time. Later on, when they were trying to put her on the table, she did bite him.
Yeah, I remember that, yes.
And then she played that off. She said, like, I'm infected. And then she looks at David and says, which means now you are. And they showed the bite, and then that's when James started kind of freaking out a little bit. And that gave Ellie the opportunity to kill him. And David didn't buy it. He's like, no, she would have turned by now or something. Or maybe at that moment it could have just been him in denial, Yeah. But she kills James, she escapes from David, goes into a different room, and the setup here is that we see Joel, who had been previously out, had been left with like, I think a knife or something by Ellie.
She leaves Joel with her knife.
And he looked like he was in no shape to do anything.
And David's men are out there in the town, like, looking for Joel with the order to kill him when they find him.
Yeah. I think this might be the first example that they really did well of showing covering for all the talk about Joel being this, like, man that could actually be kind of scary.
Yeah.
And in, like, the first episode, there were several encounters with, Marlene of the Fireflies, where she made a comment about him being really capable that intrigued Ellie. And there was also a moment when Tess was being held captive by a group, and they were like, we don't know what to do, because if we let you go, then your man's going to come after us. And they were, like, terrified of that.
Yeah.
And so, you have this idea that Joel is, like, a really scary person, and we haven't really seen much evidence to prove that to be a worthwhile suspicion, And this is the first episode, I think, where we really do get that, because he's, like, out of it. He's barely recovering from, like, a stab wound and an infection. He grabs a knife from Ellie, kind of barely manages to keep his eyes open. He's still laid out on the ground, but when we cut back to these people looking for him to kill him, he completely turns the tables on them and kills, like, 3 or 4 of them,
Oh, yeah. He kills 3 or 4 of them. He finds out where they took Ellie, and he goes after her.
And so we're set up to believe, with Ellie running from David, and Joel now, like, looking for Ellie, all this kind of stuff is happening in parallel. We're set up to believe, okay, so this is the moment where Joel is going to save Ellie.
Yeah,
and
that moment doesn't come.
Well, that's one of the things I really like about this episode, is that it starts out very tropey, but then it starts to kind of turn on its tropes.
Yeah.
And this is, like, the big one where it turns on the tropes is, like, no, Ellie doesn't get saved by Joel. Not only does she not get saved by Joel, but she doesn't need to be saved by Joel. And they make this, like, readily apparent, that she's capable. And I love it when she throws she reaches into, like, a fire pit or something and grabs a chunk of wood that's burning and throws it, and it lights the place on fire that they're in, and the guy's stalking her now, but now he's in a building that's like starting to burn down, and she ends up, like, brutally taking down David and just stabbing him to death. It's straight brutal. It's everything he deserved. And the only thing I'm left with, the only thing that kind of felt weird to me by the end of the episode, is what happened to the rest of the people in the town. They just kind of took off or something. They don't address any of them.
No, but it's not. I guess it's not important to the story. It's literally not. I mean,
I think, unless I missed it, like, there could have been a line of dialogue that just kind of addressed that away before. Take them to a secondary location or something. Like, take our people to the secondary location.
It's clear that they
anything to let us know there's something else. But no, like, they go out into the main dining area, into the main city street area, like, nobody's there.
Yeah, it's clear that they're not there. So, I mean, I don't think we need dialogue to, like, Dragon Ball Z, like, Funimation dub dialogue, like, where they're destroying helicopters, and the guy says, "Oh, I see the pilots parachuting out. They're okay."
No, I just mean, like, there should have been some explanation as to why there's nobody there. Like, we know nobody's there. I'm not saying that we don't know that. I'm just saying, like, why aren't they there? Like, there was never any moment to imply that they ever moved their people out of the way.
Yeah, that's true.
That was a little weird to me. That's, like, the one, I think, part of the episode that I wasn't a fan of. Everything else I pretty much liked.
Yeah, no, it was it was a solid episode. It's even more solid of an episode. The finale.
You're talking now about Season 1, Episode 9, Look for the Light.
Yes.
Which begins with a flashback episode of a woman going into an abandoned house, and she's running in there, and she's like, where is everybody? And she locks herself in a room behind a wall, and a clicker busts through the wall. A clicker or a stalker, I'm not sure. Busts through the wall. It's a clicker. And comes after her and is, like, attacking her, and she's pregnant, and she manages to fight off and kill it. And then as soon as, like, the fight's over and everything, she realizes she just, in that encounter, she'd already given birth. Like, in all the struggling, she had given birth. And so the baby's on the ground, and she picks up the baby and then looks down at her own leg and realizes she's been bitten. Now, what's crazy is that the actress playing this pregnant woman...
Yep, Ashley Johnson, who
played Ellie in The Last of Us game.
Yeah, yes.
So we got Joel in the last episode and Ellie in this episode from the original game.
Ellie was the mother of Ellie.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool, seeing Ellie playing Ellie, basically. Before I knew that it was Ashley Johnson playing her, I'd observed watching it that, like, wow, they did a really good job picking an actress that looks like Bella Ramsey. I'm like, she really looks like Bella Ramsey. And then I'm like, oh shit, actually. It just so happens that the voice actress looks kind of like Bella Ramsey. Because the character didn't really look that much like her in the game. The character kind of looked like Elliot Page, or at that time, Ellen Page, There was actually, like, a lawsuit about that, I think. But but yeah, like, that was kind of like a crazy moment, because I was like, wow, they did such a good job of that. And then later on I watched, I'm like, oh, that was actually the voice actress. That's crazy. So you have this scene, this mother, she just given birth to Ellie, and she's holding her baby, and then we get our title sequence, and we come back, and we're back still in that flashback, and we have Marlene arriving. And she arrives, and they make it very clear that Marlene and Anna, who is Ellie's mother, have been basically friends their entire lives. Like, it's like they were friends before all of this stuff happened. Before this apocalypse happened. And now Marlene has to kill Anna on Anna's command, basically. Anna's like, you have to do this. You have to kill me. You have to take my child and you have to kill me. She lies and says that the umbilical cord was cut before she was bitten, which was not the case. But what they end up setting up there is that this incident where her mother was attacked and the fact that the umbilical cord was connected before she cut it is what makes Ellie immune to the cordyceps.
Yeah, exactly. It's an explanation of how that happened. It ties into the climax of the episode, so it's important.
Yeah, we get the vaguest idea here. We get a bigger explanation of it later. Then we cut back to Joel and Ellie, and they're on the road, and they're walking, and they need to, Ellie says, okay, let me guess. We need to go to the top of this building, get a view, and then find out how we're going to cut through. And Joel's like, no, actually, we're going to use some dynamite I found in the last location we were at and blow our way through here. And Ellie's like, really? And he's like, no, we're going to go to the top of this building, find a way to cut through.
Yeah, they find some giraffes. It's a very touching moment.
Yeah, it's a really popular moment in the game, and they did that with the real giraffe, by the way.
Yeah, which is really cool. But the key thing is we're seeing clearly Joel has grown very close to Ellie, to the point where he's even talking about he believes Ellie and Sarah would have been good friends. Now he's talking about like his daughter, like she would have loved you, and stuff like that.
Well, there's this interesting switch between Joel and Ellie, because when we first met them, Ellie was like super talkative and kind of encouraging, some kind of a kinship between them as they were going on their journeys. And Joel, on the other hand, was just like very quiet and somber and setting up boundaries and like not to talk. After the events with David in the last episode, Ellie is clearly shaken.
Yes,
and she's basically like Joel was in the first episode. She's very quiet.
Well, she's shaken, but like the key is Joel has grown close to Ellie, because the reason Joel was so quiet and distant, first because Ellie was a job.
Mm-hmm.
Joel didn't have any relationship with her. He had his own goals and motivations. The Fireflies were going to give him compensation for doing this job. Mm-hmm. And that's all he cared about.
Well, he even had the whole thing, the rules that they had to live by, and one of them was that she was cargo.
Yeah, exactly. She was just cargo. Now he's talking about Ellie and his daughter would have been good friends. And all this wishy-washy stuff. It's clear that changed for Joel. Ellie has become a surrogate daughter. To Joel, Ellie has basically become a replacement for Sarah.
Well, that's what I was saying, is that they kind of swapped places too, because in the first episode, or the first couple episodes, Joel is very quiet, very concerned, very kind of haunted looking, kind of keeping shy of connections and stuff, while Ellie is very trying to establish connections. And then now we see Ellie is very quiet, very subdued, very haunted, and Joel is trying to create these connections.
Yeah.
So it's like they've kind of directly swapped places from their positions, from their attitudes, respectively, have kind of exactly swapped. And so now you're seeing Ellie still, it's not that Ellie is wary of Joel at this point, it's that Ellie is haunted by what she had to do. So she's kind of finally in that mind space that the apocalypse brings about, that Joel was in when we were introduced to him. And meanwhile, Joel was given hope, the thing that he had been missing.
So anyway, this doesn't last long, because the Fireflies come in and they take Joel and they take Ellie by force. They knock them out.
Mm-hmm.
And they take them to their hospital, their makeshift hospital, where Joel wakes up and he finds out from Marlene personally that they're prepping Ellie for surgery to extract the cordyceps from her and start processing the cure.
Mm-hmm. And upon that, Joel realizes, wait a minute, the cordyceps are in the brain.
Yes. Yeah, they realize it's in the brain, and so they have to cut it out from her brain. which will kill her.
Mm-hmm. And Marlene makes it clear that not only is she not going to be hurt, she's already being put under while she's being prepped for the surgery. And not only all of that, but she wasn't even informed. Like, Ellie doesn't even know that she's going to die because of the surgery. She doesn't have to deal with that. Marlene sees that as like a mercy, that she doesn't have to face her death. She doesn't know what's coming. And she's telling that to Joel as if like, this is a mercy. This is a good thing. And that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, Marlene basically tells Joel, like, oh, this is a good thing. She's saving humanity. And the key thing here is, like, they didn't give Ellie a say in this. Marlene didn't ask Ellie if, like, this is what she wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean, she used it as a straight-up selling point that Ellie didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing here is, I think Marlene miscalculates, because I don't think Marlene realizes the bond Joel developed with Ellie.
I think she realizes that it's moved from Joel not having a bond with her to Joel having a bond with her. I think she realizes that. I think what she doesn't realize is like how big of an emptiness Joel had in him that was now filled. Like the hope of Ellie being like this daughter figure to him is far more significant than she realized.
Yeah.
And
it's the fact that Joel's not going to go through Sarah again, because early in the episode, Joel reveals to Ellie that he was the one who missed, and talk about like the scar on his head, because he attempted to kill himself right after Sarah was murdered,
Yeah, he said like the second day of the outbreak. So Sarah died in the first day. So it's like right after that, like the next day he tried to kill himself. He also describes it as something that he wasn't even afraid. It's not like he was nervous about doing it. He was resolved of like, I'm just going to kill myself. And he somehow kind of twitched or something and missed.
He flinched when the gun went off.
Yeah. And because of that, he missed. And because of that, he got the scar, and also his hearing was damaged on one of his ears.
Yeah.
And that's the result of that, And so you kind of get that idea of it. And we as an audience now, which even though we knew that from watching not the suicide part, but the attempted suicide, but we knew how big of an impact that moment with Sarah was on him. This is something that Marlene doesn't quite realize. She realizes there's a bond. She doesn't realize how significant this is.
Yeah, she doesn't realize the significance of this. Marlene, I think, foolishly believes that Joel will accept that this is for the good of humanity, and she has Joel escorted outside, and then that's when everything turns.
Before we talk about that, I think it's interesting how cold they played the other Fireflies. This was revealed to Joel, and then they're like, Joel's like acting up like, what the fuck? What's going on? Take me to Ellie and stuff. And they're like hitting him and going like, be quiet or something. Like they're just kind of like very, very cold to a situation, very exerting authority over him.
There's a question, right? Like, are the Fireflies even the good guys? Mm-hmm. Are they good guys, or they're just a group with their own agenda? Mm-hmm. And to be honest, they say that they're looking for a cure to save humanity, but we spend so little time with them or learn so little about them in this that it's hard to make definitive statements. Part of me thinks that really they just want this cure so that they have something to have leverage over Fedra. Mm-hmm. And that's their main goal.
Yeah,
in all this, because they're at war with Fedra.
They're playing up this callousness, though, of these soldiers. And it's just kind of interesting because, like, there's points when they're escorting Joel where he stops, and they're, like, pushing him. Like, literally pushing him forward and going, did we say stop? And, like, exerting authority over him in this very, like, oh, we're in control of this situation.
And this is the point where, like, ever since the game came out and the ending of the game, this has been hugely controversial.
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely an ethical divide.
Yeah, there's definitely an ethical divide, because a lot of people point to this as, like, this is the evidence that Joel isn't a good person and that he was never the hero of the story. Mm-hmm. Me, I'm watching this, I think it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. I think it shows that Joel is very human. Yes. And that our journey with Joel has been him very subdued. In the game, he's supposed to be just straight up gruff. Like he's not, it's not only is he subdued, but he just like seems callous and uncaring completely in the game. In the show, we kind of have a little bit more empathy, but we can tell he's very shut off and that has deep issues. And as we mentioned with the whole thing with Marlene explaining the situation to him and the calculation that she didn't make, what this proves isn't that Joel's like some sociopath or something like that. If he was a sociopath, he wouldn't care.
No.
It's kind of the opposite.
He does care.
It shows that he's deeply human.
Yeah. So here's the thing.
Joel and very messed up.
Here's the thing. This is the mistake Marlene makes with Joel. Joel only cares about Ellie. He doesn't care about the cause. He doesn't care about saving humanity. Humanity can just continue to rot in this apocalyptic hell as far as he cares, as long as he has Ellie. That's all he cares about.
Yeah, he's basically the world's been dead to him since the second day of the outbreak.
Yeah. He's had no... Yeah, exactly.
It's like he flinched and failed to kill himself, and what he killed instead was his empathy for the world.
Yeah, he's had no desire or motivation to save it since the beginning. He took Ellie on as a job, and the reward for him wasn't some feel-good, warm, tingly feeling that he helped save humanity. Like, the reward was, he was going to get something he needed, out of it.
That shifted a little bit in the second episode, but what it shifted to is somebody else that he cared about. Not even as much as he cares about Ellie now, but Tess, and like a sense of obligation that he felt to her.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, now I'm going to take care of Ellie, not because of being rewarded, but because I owe it to Tess.
Right. Tess being like the one other person Joel cared about in that world.
And so, like, as we've gotten this journey, we've seen him kind of slowly break down. And then in the last couple of episodes, he completely broke down his walls for Ellie and only Ellie.
Yes.
And that's what changed him. And there was even like a moment where that was brought up where I think it was Ellie that was talking to him or something. And she said something about like, you've changed or like, I can't remember exactly what it was. But then he said like, it wasn't that. It was, and it was the implication was it was you. You're the one that changed me, or you're the one that opened me up, and that's exactly what happened. So here's where the turn happens that we've talked about. Joel, in his mind now set on protecting Ellie, as an audience, us discovering he really is as ruthless as we've been led to believe. And now we get to see like, okay, well now we understand what he's capable of and what he's going to do. And
he goes through that hospital murdering fireflies.
He's like the Terminator. He's just just going through it,
Yeah, he's just going through it. And again, you'd say like his actions are horrific, but it's not like they weren't trying to kill him in turn. It's not like they would just let him walk in there and get Ellie with no confrontation just because he says, oh, okay, actually I don't consent to this. He did have to fight if he was going to get Ellie. And he does do it out of, like, a sense of love. Yeah.
It's his love, it's his connection to Ellie that drives him. It's not like greed. It's like, you could say it's greedy because he's putting his own feelings ahead of everybody else's, but it comes from, like, a deep connection that he now has to Ellie. This feeling that Ellie is like his daughter, which is a little bit on the delusional side, and kind of goes into the fact that he is deeply troubled. Basically what it implies is since he tried to kill himself, he's basically, like, he shut walls around him, and he's never dealt with his shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like in this 20 years or something, he has never once dealt with his shit.
He's been broken the entire time.
Yeah. And so like, this is an issue of it. This isn't somebody who's grieved and now has taken on his girls. It's somebody who shut himself off from grief.
Basically, the only people he had in his life after that he cared about was his brother and Tess.
Yeah. And the show also does a good job of kind of setting the precedent that his brother in his mind is safe.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter if the world is returned or not. His brother's in a safe position right now. Yeah. So he's not really worried about him.
He found Tommy and he found out that he's in a safe space. Probably one of the safest spaces in the entire world.
Yeah. There's nothing to be worried about. There's no, like, pressing threat at all. Like, not even remotely. He's very safe. And so, like, this is something that wouldn't even come as a consideration to him. Because his brother's having a child, so he has new family coming into this world, and he's not concerned about it because his brother in his mind is safe. It's not an issue that's at the front of his mind. So the only thing that's at risk right now is Ellie.
So Joel, murders his way to the operating room where they're preparing to start on Ellie. And, Joel commands the surgeon to step away. He gives, like, some mild verbal resistance, and Joel just caps him right there.
Yeah,
in front
just
of the
like,
nurses.
Without a second thought.
Yeah, without a second thought. Also, fun fact, one of the nurses in the scene is Laura Bailey,
who plays a character that's a major character in the second game.
Yes.
Who we should be seeing in season 2, I assume.
We should be seeing too. We will no elaboration on that right now. not in this podcast. This is called full spoilers, but it's only full spoilers for the stuff that's released.
Yeah.
That we're discussing.
I haven't played either of the games, so I know spoilers just because they're in the zeitgeist.
Yeah,
and honestly, the big spoilers I know still haven't even happened yet, so.
Yeah, exactly. Again, not going to be elaborated on here. This isn't full spoilers about The Last of Us Part 2 or even like the second season, so.
Yeah, exactly. We're largely blind except for what's in the zeitgeist anyways, though, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he grabs Ellie. It looks like at first that he let the nurses live, even though he killed the doctor. I think that there's an implication you can make by the events of the end that he probably killed them too.
Marlene confronts him, begs him to change his mind about the whole thing, and,
She even lowers her weapon. She had her weapon trained on him, and she lowers it to try to reason with him.
And he just caps her, too.
Yeah, just caps her when she's not even a threat at that point.
She's on the ground, she begs him, and he just tells her, you just come after us.
Yeah, and so he kills her, and that's why I said, there's an implication that maybe he wiped out the nurses, too, because they kind of play this idea of, he showed mercy in that one instance. It's we just didn't see what happened. I think the big implication is that he probably just killed everybody that was there, because he didn't want to leave any threats behind, anything that was going to come after him later.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And so he takes an unconscious Ellie, and he takes an SUV that Marlene had kind of gassed up for him to take and leave with, but he takes that and leaves with Ellie instead.
But the big key takeaway is, at the end, there's a scene where he's talking to Ellie, and Ellie wakes up, and he lies about what happened. He claims that they had several candidates for a cure, and Ellie was just one of them, and
it didn't go anywhere anyways.
It didn't go anywhere anyways.
He mentions that he says they were attacked by
they were attacked by raiders, and he had to get out of there with her. And there's a sense Ellie knows that he's lying about everything. She doesn't confront him or outright say that she knows he's lying. The tell is when she makes him promise that everything he told her is the truth.
We should point out, it should be obvious, but we should point out that they're headed back to Wyoming, to where Tommy is, to that encampment.
He mentioned going back to Wyoming earlier in the episode, yeah.
Yeah. And so they're heading back there. The car breaks down and they end up hiking some of it. They get to a nice vista where they can see the town, and they're on the way, and he's all, look at it, he's all, we're almost there. And Joel's just kind of he's just so happy and, happy-go-lucky and everything. Ellie is still clearly a little kind of troubled, and even more so, she can like you said, she can tell that Joel's been lying, that something's up, and she just asks Joel straight out. She says, "Were you lying to me about what happened? Is everything that's going on with everything that went on with the Fireflies?" And Joel says no, and Ellie just says okay. And to me, what that says is Ellie knows that he's lying, but she's just accepting it.
Yeah,
she's just okay, I'll accept that. It's over, She doesn't know the full details of what's going on with everything, but it seems like she's kind of given up on her mission and just kind of accepted that it's over. And that's kind of the interesting thing, because it's not just Joel lying to her, it's her knowing that and still accepting it. And that's where the episode ends. That's where the season ends.
Yep, that's it for Last of Us until next year.
I believe the second game, this isn't spoiler territory or anything, I believe the second game, Ellie's several years older. Something 4 years older. I think she was 14 and she's 19 in the second game.
Yeah, the second game picks up a few years after the first game ends, so if they follow the games, there may be a bit of a time jump.
Which, by the way, Bella Ramsey, who plays Ellie, is actually 19 in real life. So.
Okay, but there might be a time jump, or we might get new material for the show that takes place within that gap.
They already said that season 2 is not going to be all of the second game.
Yeah.
Bella Ramsey is the same age that Ellie was in the second game.
Yeah.
So she can traverse the time skip immediately. They don't have to age her up. They actually aged her down a bit using different methods for the show. For the first season, all they have to do is not do that for her to age up a bit for the second one. And they've already confirmed that, because that was a concern that is she going to be in it because she's supposed to be older? older. It's like, well, the actress is older. And so it's going to be fine, you know? And they've already kind of confirmed that they said if Bella Ramsey wants to be in season 2, we're not recasting her, basically.
That's The Last of Us.
Mm-hmm. That is the end of the season. I enjoyed the show. I think it definitely picked up in the second half. Like I said, I had issues in the first couple episodes. I thought it was just super tropey. I don't think they really started challenging the tropes until like maybe the last third of the season. And we just had a few good episodes here and there between that. Like we had episode 3 was a classic, and then we had that Left Behind episode, which ironically a lot of people, and I noticed that this was mostly people that were into the game, did not like the way they handled Left Behind. I think it's because in the game that was DLC, and so you you didn't have that break, and so basically they felt that the audience was going to be distracted by that episode, and instead of them sticking with the idea of Joel being injured and what was happening with him. As somebody who didn't play the games, I thought that was the perfect place to put it. I thought it worked exactly how it should. I just observed that was kind of strange, that I watched people talking about this episode, and pretty much everybody who didn't play the games liked the way the episode fit in, and everybody who did play the games didn't. Okay, so thank you everybody for listening. You can follow me on Twitter. I am at Tyson Gifford. Will is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our SoundCloud page, our website, thetotalscreen.com, our Facebook, everything like that. If you go to our website, thetotalscreen.com, and open up any container story for any of the episodes of the podcast, you can find all of the relevant links to our social accounts, also to our SoundCloud page, everything there. It's all there and easy to find. You can also check out all of our backlog of our podcast on our YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to the podcast through your podcast client of choice like Apple Podcast or Pocket Cast. Next week, we are going to be talking about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Booster Pass Wave 4, and also just kind of covering some news from like probably last week and this coming week. We'll just cover a few news stories as well. And that's going to be it for next week's podcast. So stay tuned for that. Thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.